this search for a better life overseas, we forget that you don't have to be one of the people traveling, or you don't have to be the one wanting to migrate. It'll affect all of us at some point in our lives. Be you based in Africa, based abroad, and not planning to go back because your family is here, trust me, we all will have an effect if you're an African. Be it a relative, be it yourself, and some others keep saying that they're self-sufficient and they don't think that they'll ever plan to relocate, to come abroad, either to the US, to the UK, to mainland Europe, because they're happy, they're self-contented, they have their businesses, and they're thriving in Africa. Good on you. But don't be naive to think that this migration, I can call it crisis, from Africa to the diaspora in search of a better life, don't think at all that it will not affect you or somebody in your family, because the domino effect is still being uncovered, and the damages, or would I say the amount of people daily that gets affected indirectly due to our choices to travel is staggering. I did not plan to do this video. I was actually editing a video on my desk, and I was trying to reply to a lot of your comments from my last video. By the way, if you've not seen that video, I shared 2 videos on my opinion on people wanting to relocate abroad, suddenly from Africa, and I was trying to give my take on staying here for 20 years and the feeling of being a loser or having nothing to show after 20 years of working hard. And that has just opened conversations which I am working on solutions. Like I said in my last video, I'm collating a lot of emails and I'll start sharing. But before, I just thought I'll drop this because we underestimate the fact that you don't have to be necessarily involved directly to have an effect on your day-to-day. Let me give you guys a very quick story. Let me share this story, okay? I don't want this video to be more than 15 minutes long because I have to go pick the kids up. This was very impromptu, and yeah, by the way, I'm Lulu. This is Lulu Diaries, and thanks for clicking on this video. We share a lot of information here on how to get better, and recently we're talking about migration from Africa, the pros, the cons, and what we'll do different. Do you want to remain here? Do you want to go back? Let's get into this. I'll tell you guys a quick story, okay? About 11 or 10 years ago, my third was about a few months old, about a year old. I was full-time work, and my husband was in full-time work as well. We needed somebody to look after the kids. I've always had nannies because nursery costs were just impossible, because I had 2 kids, almost like Irish twins, very close in age. So I struggled to put 2 of them in nursery, so I had live-in nannies. Most of my nannies were from Europe. But this particular time, my nanny left and we needed childcare ASAP. Okay, so I spoke to one of my sisters. I said, I need childcare. And she said, oh, I've got this lady. I said, I'm not ready yet. Once my husband gets his contract, I'll let you know. She said, that's fine. Okay, guess what? A few days later, she called me and I was not near my phone. She called. I came and my bell rang. My doorbell rang. Went to the doorbell and I saw this lady who looked like my mom's age, or maybe older physically. She looked very beaten. She looked very upset. She was actually in tears, begging to stay, and I was very confused. So I called. She came with somebody who was like a pastor from the church she attended, where we lived at the time, and he'd heard that we needed a nanny, so he quickly rushed this lady to our house. Honestly, we were put on the spot. She looked like my mother's age. I could not turn her down. And she said, please, she started calling me auntie, which was just, I said, no, let's not do that. And she said, please, she's desperate, she doesn't need any pay, she just needs a place to stay. I was put on the spot and I felt like I couldn't really say no. After a lot of back and forth, we agreed, and the person who brought her begged us and said, I'm really desperate. She's been sleeping in church from home to home and we can't keep her anymore. So please keep her for us. It was like emotional blackmail. Anyway, long story short, we kept her. We lived with her. But luckily, my husband got a job, I think maybe 2 months later. But in the first 2 months, we could not keep her doing nothing because she was so proactive. She was a lot older. She had a few health concerns, which I'll talk about more in this video. So baby will cry and she'll come to my room. I'm like, no, auntie, don't. Anyway, she was part of the family, a very fun part of the family, and she stayed with us for 2 years after that. She looked after my son fully. She was like a mother figure to them, to me. She was not without fault like all of us, but there was something that stood out about her. She had she would not talk about her family back home. The reason why I asked her was because once, the doorbell rang once, and I was at work, and she ran upstairs and called me and said she could not open the door. I said, why? She said she was scared that it could be the police because she did not have the right papers. I was like, shoot, I should have asked these questions, Anyway, I said, don't worry. She looked peeped and she ignored, and it was just some kind of letter that there were these high-vis jackets to deliver. When I came back, I had a conversation. I said, I'm not really comfortable keeping you at home with my kids, just in case we had an emergency. I needed to maybe call like either the police or any sort of help, emergency. What would you do? And she said, oh, she'll call, but for now, she don't talk about it. I said, what about your health? Because she kept going to take medication for something she had and she would not tell us. She could not eat certain meals. She cooked her food different, without salt, now that I know what she had, she had a very, very severe case of hypertension, high blood pressure, and other issues. So she promised that she was going to regularize things, and she gave me a story that I don't want to share now. Anyway, so every time we paid her, we gave her cash. She asked only for cash. She'll take it, walk miles, and send it back home. One day I asked her, I said, all of this money, auntie, what were you doing? She said, oh, she has 2 sons back home. And then she sat me down and told me her story. And I'm going to tell you guys why net migration affects a lot more people than they care to talk about. She was a very wealthy, or married to a very wealthy man in the 70s, 80s. She used to come into the UK. She was in business of buying wrapper materials. Back in the day, I think it was like Holland fabric. And she'll buy them from here, go and sell them back in Nigeria. She was doing well. And then things happened. Life happened to her husband like it does back home. And they lost almost everything. Okay. Because of that, she started struggling, and her husband had always said, I'm not coming back to that UK. I can only go and visit. You go if you're insisting that you need to start your life and need to fend for the family, because they really moved from everything to nothing. So they sold one of their homes. It was a really sad story. And the man and she chose to travel and come. 4 years after being in the UK, he met somebody else. And the kid, she had 2 sons. They kept saying to her, Daddy has somebody else. And he remarried and had 2 other kids while she was here. When I met her, she'd been in the UK for 14 years. She came with a visitor visa because she still had, a very good history of coming back in the 80s and leaving. And they had, I think, some old bank statements they could show. And she could not go back for 2 reasons. One, the husband was remarried, and apparently kids were suffering, so she had to work for them. The kids, with her absence of 14 years, she left them, they were 5 and I think 3. They did not have any proper education, so basically there was nothing that they were doing for themselves. They became street kids and got themselves involved in crime. So what she was doing monthly was work hard and send the money to them. She became so desperate at some point after working with us for like a few years, and asked if my mom or my parents could take one of her sons. We're in the process of trying to arrange that, and suddenly one day she got up and said she wanted to leave. Suddenly. I said, you sure? She's like, yeah, she wants to go to London. The money is not enough, because at that point my kids were all in school and she was just being kept there like family. I was giving her an allowance to, take care of her basic needs. And I said, okay. She said, because, we're paying her very little, and she was not doing anything. I was cooking. I was just looking after her, feeding her, everything. And I tried, and she said, no, she got a job in London and she left. She left in 2018. and I missed her. Sometimes I'll try to call when I look at pictures. I remember how the kids will ask. I'll try to get in touch and she'll send me one line. She could not actually even type because she could not really speak English as such. So I forgot about her. One blessed day, I got a call from the mutual friend who introduced me to her, and she said, I have some news. What are you doing? I didn't think anything because this mutual friend is like my sister. So we talk about everything. I'm like, what is happening? Tell me. And she said, oh, auntie so and so moved to London, was working, using somebody else's documents to work, and she was underground. This happened in January of 2020. I remember very well the year because it's the year COVID attacked the world. And now that I hear what happened, I feel she was one of the first cases of COVID because she had underlying health issues before anybody knew about COVID. Has happened on the first week of Jan, before the world went into shutdown in Feb or March. She was underground, she worked a lot, and she collapsed, fell down, and she was taken to the hospital. When she arrived, she was put in an induced coma, and nobody could identify her. They traced one of her last calls to a lady in London. So this lady was called, and she identified that she knew her, and because she'd been there for almost 3 weeks with nobody to identify her, she had no ID on her that was credible. Nobody knew anything about her except the person who hooked me up with her years ago, because she went back doing the same kind of work but was doing a lot more. Every 3rd of the month for 15 years, this woman will work. She kept her cash and she'll send it to her kids. Her 2 sons, who she described as almost juveniles. She herself was so miserable. She looked a lot older than she was, because I heard that she was in her late 50s at the time, but she looked like she was 70. She had developed health issues because, one, she was heartbroken because her life had turned around. Coming to the UK after 14 years of being promised from one lawyer to the next that she'll resolve her papers, the years went, the months went to years, a decade and a half later. And in fact, when she passed away in 2020, she'd been here for 20 years. She said she had nothing to her name back home because everything she sent to her husband in the first 5 years of her life before she became unwell, he squandered it with you know who. Men. I'm not going to have a debate here on sex. Anyway. So she was depressed and she decided to stay here because there was nothing left for her back home. Her kids had become complete strangers. They were, as I said, juveniles almost. So the only thing that she had was to carry on working and hope that one day she could have her papers and bring her kids here, because at that point they were almost over 18. Now, what's the moral of the story? I'm not here to just keep depressing you guys with sad stories, but this is an example, just one of many cases of people who come here with the best of intentions and end up staying years, hoping, praying, and nothing happens. The effect, the domino effect of this for you watching and you're thinking, how does that affect my mom is here, my dad is here? Let me tell you, if you have kids and you're in Africa and your kids in the future, you have a daughter or son, they need you here to visit, and then you have to look at your grandkids perhaps, just the fact that you are deprived from your own parents, so it's a generation thing. Your kids will always be your kids and you look after them either ways. You can say, oh, I'm only going to visit and I'll go back, but most times, whether we like it or not, the mothers tend to stay with their daughters. In the US, there's a pandemic of women without their husbands, broken homes, even in Europe, because the women have acclimatized, they've settled down, they almost don't see themselves going back. The men are adamant that they want to stay. That's the first chain. Okay, and then if you both decide to stay, say in the US or the UK with your parents, with your kids, what about your parents? Do you realize that the biggest killer in Europe and the US after things like heart problems is Alzheimer's and dementia? And that's mainly caused by loneliness. So a lot of our grandmothers back home whose kids are our mother's ages have left them. And I don't want to make it personal about me, but I have something similar that happened with my grandmother because she was alone. All of her kids had left. And I think that loneliness was part of what killed her. So there is the domino effect of migration that you are not seeing now. It might be myopic, but it would affect you somehow. I cannot do everything. I'm just one person. But what I'm trying to do is reach out to as many people as possible to explain to them that we can help ourselves because our governments clearly have failed us. And how do we help ourselves? By doing several things. And that is what I've been compiling on my laptop to share with you guys. And I think that like a community, especially those of us in the diaspora who've done well, we can form that basis. We can write that blueprint. We can dictate how things work, and we can come together, bring our resources, our intelligence, our knowledge, our exposure, our different backgrounds and training, and be self-sufficient without the government. We can create more jobs, and we can try to encourage people to move back, because what is happening is all of our best talents are being exported, and then there's a ripple effect on our kids, our grandkids, our parents, our loved ones, marriages, single parents. It is a very, very intertwined and very long chain that our decisions today will affect. More children don't have father figures. More mothers are single mothers. The rates of divorce are a lot higher in this part of the world, which we can talk about in another video, and the reasons why. I've done some more research on that. And I'm not saying people don't have issues back home and single mothers, but do your research, check the numbers. What about our parents who are abandoning them in the villages? And we're actually looking now for nannies. We're paying for nannies. People are opening care homes in Africa. We've never heard about that before because our culture taught us that our mothers will be looked after by us. But now everybody has left the country. They've all been exported overseas, and we're looking after other people's parents in homes while our parents are looked after by others. How does this sound okay to us? It is a plague, and the domino effect is wider than we can even imagine. We'll keep uncovering the issues every day. Those of us who remain here as well, choose not to go back, and the men leave. Do you know how many kids every day get killed on the streets in London because they are single mothers whose husbands have decided to move back? This is not only for Africa, even the Caribbean, around the world. It is a problem. We are doing to others what we cannot do to ourselves. I think that's a fallacy. Let's just think deeply. Where are your relatives? Who are those that you're working hard for? Would they appreciate what you've done? Do they understand the sacrifices that we put in when we do the menial jobs here? We work in care homes to look after them. I doubt that they even have a clue. But I think that at this point, nobody's naive. We have the internet, and we will keep sharing what we know and trying to impact and educate those of us who are here to say we should start the ball rolling and looking for solutions on how to find the sweet spot. I always say there's no right or wrong, but I'm here to just share what I think is happening and see if we can find a solution together. And I want to thank you guys again. Please keep your emails up. I cannot thank you guys enough for all of your concern, all of your ideas. Underneath this video, I'll have a link where if you want to join our community, not necessarily on YouTube, I'll try to get a Discord community where we start the conversation, because there is A, who has this know-how, and then there's C, who is looking to be employed. We all can work together irrespective of where you are in Africa, I got you. And I'm talking to people from everywhere. South, North Africa, East Africa, West Africa, Central Africa. We are one. So anyway, thanks very much for watching this video, and if you've not subscribed, this is a good time to, because on this channel, gosh, we will share a lot of informative ideas on how we can move ourselves from here to here and be a better version of ourselves, either abroad, in Africa, or wherever we choose to settle. It's just a location. Anyway, thanks again, and I'm really running late. I have to go pick my kids up. This was a non-planned video. I was working and I decided to just share that quick thing that came to mind. I'll see you guys in my next video, and yeah, bye-bye. Bye.